Okay, what I'd like to talk to you about a little bit is my perspective and where we are kind of temporally is in public affairs. And I think that things have changed a lot. If you think about things for the last 14 years, and this is from an Army perspective especially, but I think it applies to all of the services. You know, for the last 14 years of warfare, the United States Army has had the luxury of having a great relationship, mutually beneficial relationship between the media and the Army and our public affairs officers. And as such, you know, because we had a lot of boots on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan, we had media that understood and knew how and got into the fight and got to watch the fight. And we had the United States Army's story, and the story of our soldiers was thrust into the living rooms of America through the lens of warfare for the last 14 years. And media embeds were everywhere. They were all over the battlefield. And the American public was able to understand what their military was doing, and also especially what their Army was doing through that lens of warfare. And that allowed us to bridge what I would call as that civ-mil divide, or that drift that occurs because 99% of Americans have never served and do not serve in the United States military. And so they got to understand there's kind of a dashed line bridge between the citizens of the United States of America and their Army. But things have changed. Things have changed drastically. And I like to coin this as a strategic communications inflection point, especially for our Army. And because of that, what we have to do is we have to reverse our thinking. And the era of the media embed in abundance is over. I am not saying media embeds are over. I am saying that having them in abundance all over the place with boots on the ground in Iraq and Afghanistan, those days, the connective tissue, the resources that were there, you know, the SOPs, the understanding of how to take media knew that where they could go, who they could see, transportation, get them in, boom, we got them out to the battlefield, and they got to see soldiers, they posted their stories, done, easy. It wasn't easy, we were at war. But from a public affairs perspective, we have to flip our thinking because that era is over. And now how do we connect the media to the Army, especially, or the military, or your agency, or your nation if you're international? How do you get out and proactively get the media to be able to facilitate telling the story for your organization, in this case, the United States Army? And so what I'm asking our public affairs officers, the United States Army, is to think differently now. We don't have the luxury to sit back, rest on our laurels, know that the media are going to get delivered to us, and then we just take them, we spread them out to see soldiers, and bam, the story gets out to the United States of America and our citizens, and we therefore bridge that gap. So we have to think, how do we proactively get into the media and get out to tell the story, especially tell the story where we are not? And I'm going to show you where we are not, and I'm going to show you why I think it is vitally important now, and why this is an inflection point. We have to change our mentality as public affairs officers. And we have to go from a reactive and passive state where we allow them to come to us, and we have to get aggressive and get into an active state. And why is it important? Why is it important? What is the source of power for the United States military, but especially for the United States Army? What is it? People. It is people. It is the American people. We are not a platform-based institution. You can argue, I'm not saying you are, but you can argue that the Coast Guard, that the Marine Corps a little bit, but more the Navy and the Air Force are platform-based centrally. But the Army, we are people-based. The source of our power is people. And where do we get our people? It's the American people. Next slide. And how is that power manifested? It is manifested in three ways. It's manifested through trust and confidence of the American people. It is manifested through young Americans who we recruit to come into the force. And it is manifested through the dollars, the taxpayer dollars that our citizens give us and that Congress authorizes and appropriates for us to be able to have the resources to do our job, to both, you know, from a people perspective, modernization, readiness. That is the source of our power. And I will tell you that the United States Army is disadvantaged. It is more disadvantaged than every other service here. It's disadvantaged, I would argue, for three reasons. Number one, culturally, we love to talk to ourselves and think we're talking to everybody else. All right? So how do you gain that trust and confidence if you're not talking to audiences outside? Now, trust and confidence right now, I would say, is pretty darn high. The American people have high trust and confidence in the United States Army. They've had it for the last 14 years. But how do you maintain that? You lose trust and confidence in buckets, you gain it in drips. It's temporal and it is fleeting in nature, especially in American society today. We've enjoyed it greatly for 14 years. But now how do you earn it every single day and maintain it? And if you fade from the public eye, if you aren't earning it every day, that trust and confidence, especially in today's 24/7 news cycle, this culture, the American culture of entertainment and what's right in front of me and sports and getting away and fading from their mindset, you'll just naturally drift away. So how do you get out and proactively tell the story of what America's Army is doing to our citizens? And I'm going to talk about that. Recruiting. We are a people-based organization. I talked about the fact that we're disadvantaged. We're also disadvantaged, secondly, because we are the biggest service. By far, we are the biggest service, so we are more reliant on people and American citizens to come into the force. And there are only 34 million young Americans aged 17 to 24 that are even recruitable into our military, much less our Army, and there's 34 million of them, only 2.9 out of every 10 are recruitable. 29% for physical, mental, or incarceration reasons. And that population is in high demand. That population is in very high demand. You have an economy that's that much better, so jobs are easier to get now. You have colleges and universities. We have the other services. We have other agencies. We have a lot of people trying to compete for that population. And the United States military, unfortunately, often, depending on where you are in the country, is the choice of last resort. And equally unfortunate, if you are wearing the uniform I am wearing, is that within the services, often, in many places, the choice of last resort within the services is the United States Army. And so we have a challenge to get after. We have to get out and talk to those 17 to 24-year-olds, communicate with them, and recruit them, and advertise, and let them understand what our brand is and what we do, and take away some of the misperceptions about the United States Army that I'm going to talk about. Why? Because people are our source of power. And recruiting young Americans, if we want to maintain the same high-quality, all-volunteer force, where 65% of American soldiers had boots on the ground representing our military for the last 14 years in Iraq and Afghanistan, if we want that same high-quality, all-volunteer force that America, our citizens, our military, and our Army, quite frankly, take for granted, then we have got to get out and tell the story, or we will fade away. Lastly is dollars. I shouldn't have to tell you that the last 14 years we enjoyed a wealth of resources in order to take care of our missions in Iraq and Afghanistan to fight these wars. America got behind us, obviously, and we had just about anything that we needed, anytime, and we enjoyed the luxury of having almost unending resources, overseas contingency ops dollars, to be able to fight and win our wars. Those days are over. And we have to change our thinking again. And we have to understand that, rightly so, we are being held accountable to take care of the taxpayer dollars and make sure every dollar is spent wisely. But I will tell you that if you look at it, there's a lot of competition, and resources are tough right now. We're in a resource-constrained environment. And as a matter of fact, the United States Army, I would argue to you, most people don't understand what we're doing today. And they don't understand why we need the resources we are asking for, because why? We are not communicating effectively enough, and the wars have gone away and faded away from the minds of Americans, and they're focused on other things. They don't know that we have 190,000 United States Army soldiers today. 190,000. We have an end strength of 490,000 active duty. 190,000 soldiers that are forward deployed, stationed, or supporting operations in over 140 countries around the world today. 62 cents on every dollar that we spend goes to paying for people. That leaves 38 cents to take care of the other two legs in the three-legged stool that underpins the foundation of the United States Army. The second leg is readiness. And that is our Chief of Staff of the Army's number one, number two, and number three priority is readiness. And we have to train and maintain readiness. You all understand this if you're in the service. That is something, again, that you can lose very quickly if you aren't trying to maintain it every single day. Right now, when you look at readiness, we had about 6 years ago, we had 45 brigade combat teams, the coin of the realm, that 3,000 to 5,000 person organization that was used to kind of fight and win the wars, and do our bidding in Iraq and Afghanistan. Right now, we are at 32 going to 30 BCTs, brigade combat teams. We have probably lost about 25% capacity between 45 to 32 to 30 because we did add an extra battalion in some of those brigade combat teams. So we have reduced in capacity by about 25 to 30% of what we need to maintain readiness in order to meet the missions that our nation is asking us to do. And then, oh, by the way, of those brigade combat teams and almost all brigades across the Army, even our functional and multifunctional brigades, we are only at 33% of those being at high readiness. Whereas we used to enjoy about 50 to 60% readiness when we had 45 brigade combat teams. So we have lost 30% of our capacity, 25 to 30% of our capacity, and we have lost the amount of those units that are at high readiness, which makes us less ready. Why is that? Because we don't have enough dollars to be able to maintain enough forces at high readiness to do anything except what we're just about doing right now to meet our current commitments around the world, those 190,000 soldiers in 140 countries. And our national military strategy is asking us to do a heck of a lot more than that. It's asking us to deny, defeat, dismantle and defeat terrorist and extremist organizations, and it's telling us to be able to do our side as part of the joint force to be able to defeat and deny near-peer adversaries in 2 different theaters. Yet, all of our dollars are being focused on readiness, and enough readiness that is allowing us to do what our nation is asking us to do with that 190,000 executing operations from Pacific pathways in Asia all the way to Europe, to Syria, to Iraq, to Afghanistan, you name it. And so that is tough, and the number of dollars we have to do that is tough. Lastly is modernization. Right now we are mortgaging our future readiness and our modernization programs overall 40% cuts across every single modernization program. The future of what you are going to operate on if you're in the United States Army, the type of equipment that you're going to operate on 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now is being mortgaged because we don't have the funds to be able to pay for it like we want to. And that is the truth. And so we have to, because our number one priority is making sure we can do what our nation asks us to do today. And we are mortgaging a bit of our future readiness, and we're taking risk there in order to make sure that we pay for the people we have in our organization, which is why you're seeing a lot of the changes that we're looking at, the United States military is looking at to try and harvest some more savings within that the amount of money that it takes us just to pay for a soldier, sailor, airman, Marine, and especially in the Army's perspective, and then to maintain what forces we do have ready enough to meet what our nation is asking us today. And so this is tough. So why is it important? It's exceptionally important that we tell that story so that we can get the trust and confidence of the American people, maintain it, so that we can get those young recruits in, and so that we can also have the dollars we need to do what our nation is asking us to do now and into the future.